Imagine listening to your favorite song, feeling the beat, the emotion, the story behind every lyric. Now, what if I told you that the artist behind that song is barely making any money from the streams you're giving them? Hard to believe, right? Spotify, the platform millions of us use every day to discover new music and enjoy our favorite tracks, is at the center of a huge debate. And it raises one big question: are artists really getting paid fairly? You see, while Spotify has made it incredibly easy for us to access music, there's a darker side to how the platform operates. For many artists, especially smaller or independent ones, the payouts they receive are shockingly low. So, how did we get here? How can Spotify be worth billions while so many musicians struggle to make a living? In today's video, we're going to dive deep into this issue, explore how Spotify really works, and why so many artists feel like they're being shortchanged. But more importantly, we'll ask the question, is there a better way? Let's get started by going back to where it all began. The rise of Spotify, a game changer for music. Or was it? Back in 2008, when Spotify launched, it was a game changer for music fans. Instead of buying individual albums or downloading songs illegally, you could stream almost any song you wanted, legally, for a small monthly fee. It seemed like a win-win. Piracy dropped, record labels started getting paid again, and music became more accessible than ever before. For us, the listeners, it was incredible. But for the artists, that's where things get complicated. In the old days, artists made money from selling physical copies of their music, vinyl, CDs, tapes. They had direct control over their earnings. But in the streaming age, that income model changed completely. With Spotify, artists are paid based on how many streams their songs get. But here's the shocking part. For each stream, an artist earns just a fraction of a penny. That's right. To make even $1, an artist's song needs to be streamed around 250 times, and if that sounds bad, it gets worse. The harsh reality of streaming royalties. Let's break it down. On average, Spotify pays between $0.003 and $0.005 per stream. So, if you're an artist and your song gets 1,000 streams, you'd make about $3, barely enough to buy a coffee. For big-name artists with millions of streams, this might not seem like a huge issue, but for independent artists, or those just starting out, it's crushing. They pour their heart and soul into creating music, only to earn a few dollars, even when their music is enjoyed by thousands. To put it in perspective, if an artist's album gets 1 million streams, they'd earn somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000. Now, that sounds decent until you consider how much time, effort, and money it takes to record, produce, and market that album. For many, that payout isn't even enough to cover their costs. But why are the payouts so low? How the money flows? Who's really getting paid? Here's the thing. Spotify doesn't keep all the money for itself. In fact, about 70% of Spotify's revenue goes to what are called rights holders. These are usually record labels and distributors, not the artist directly. So if you're an artist signed to a major label, a big chunk of that money goes to the label before the artist ever sees a dime. This creates a huge divide between independent artists and those signed to major labels. Independent artists have more control over their earnings, but they still rely on massive amounts of streams to make a living. Meanwhile, major label artists may have the backing of a huge machine, but their cut of the revenue is often even smaller due to contracts that favor the label. And here's where things get emotional. Imagine being a musician who's worked their whole life to create something meaningful, only to see your art turned into a number on a streaming platform. That's the reality many artists face today. They're making music because they love it, but financially, they're barely getting by. The growing frustration among artists. Many artists have spoken out about this problem. Radiohead's Tom York called Spotify the last desperate fart of a dying pop. Taylor Swift famously removed her entire catalog from Spotify in protest back in 2014, before eventually renegotiating her terms. Even Jay-Z launched his own streaming service, Tidal, to try and give artists a better deal. The frustration is real, and it's growing. For musicians, streaming feels like a necessary evil. They need the exposure Spotify provides. After all, the platform has over 500 million users globally. But at the same time, they know that streaming alone isn't enough to sustain a career. Most artists now rely on touring, selling merchandise, and brand partnerships to make up the difference. But what about the artists who don't have those opportunities? So, is there a solution? The big question is, can this system be fixed? Some experts believe the answer is in a new payment model. Right now, Spotify pools all subscription and ad revenue together and distributes it based on total streams. But there's a different model, called a user-centric payment system, that some believe could make things fairer. In this model, your subscription fee would go directly to the artists you listen to the most. If you spend all month listening to one indie artist, they would get a bigger cut of your subscription. This would give smaller artists a better chance of earning real money from their most dedicated fans. But there's resistance to this idea. The major make massive profits from the current system aren't too eager to change it. After all, the big players benefit the most when the money is pooled together. They rake in the cash from streams of their top artists, leaving smaller, independent musicians to fight for the crumbs. It's a classic case of the rich getting richer, while the struggling artists get left behind. But here's where things could start to change. The push for change. Can artists fight back? In recent years, we've seen more and more artists take a stand. Independent musicians are finding ways to connect directly with their fans through platforms like Bandcamp, where they can sell their music and merchandise and keep a bigger slice of the pie. Bandcamp, unlike Spotify, allows artists to set their own prices, and fans can pay directly to support them. This model gives musicians more control over their income and more personal interaction with their audience. Other artists are embracing Patreon, a platform where fans can subscribe monthly and directly support creators. These platforms give artists a way to make money from their true fans without relying entirely on streams, but they still come with challenges. Not every artist has a huge fan base willing to pay extra, and for many, Spotify is still the primary way they reach listeners. But change is coming. Fans are becoming more aware of how little artists earn from streaming, and some are choosing to support their favorite musicians in other ways. And with more artists speaking out about the unfairness of the system, the pressure on Spotify and other streaming services is building. Why this matters for music's future. At the heart of all this is a bigger question. What does the future of music look like if artists can't make a fair living from their work? If musicians are forced to treat their passion like a side hustle, will we lose out on the incredible, diverse music that makes our lives richer? Will only the biggest, most mainstream artists survive, while indie and experimental music fades away? Think about the music you love. How would it feel if your favorite artist had to stop making music because they couldn't pay their bills? It's a reality that many musicians face today, and it's a future none of us want to see. Spotify has undoubtedly changed the music industry, for better and worse. It has given us access to more music than ever before, but it's also created a system that prioritizes profits over artists. The question now is, can we find a way to make streaming fair for everyone, not just the top-tier labels and executives? What can we do? As listeners, we're not powerless. We have a role to play in supporting the artists we love. Here are a few things you can do. Support artists directly. If you love an artist, buy their music on Bandcamp, order their merchandise, or go to their shows. Streaming is convenient, but direct support makes a real difference. Consider alternative platforms. Explore music on Bandcamp, SoundCloud, or other platforms that offer better deals for artists. Be an advocate. Talk about this issue with friends. Share content that raises awareness, and encourage others to think about how their streaming habits impact artists. Conclusion: the future of music is in our hands. The truth about Spotify isn't just about numbers, contracts, or business models. It's about people. It's about the artists who create the soundtracks to our lives, the ones who make the music that comforts, excites, and inspires us. They deserve to be compensated fairly for their work, and it's up to all of us, listeners, platforms, and the industry itself, to find a better way. The question is, will Spotify and other streaming services adapt to a more equitable system? Or will the current model continue to widen the gap between artists and the money they deserve? Thanks for watching today's breakdown on the truth about Spotify. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Biz Breakdowns for more eye-opening stories about the industries shaping our world. And before you go, check out our next video where we dive into how independent creators are changing the game. Click the link on the screen now. See you there.